swept away by floodwater, fired at by angry landowners, held hostage live on air. These are live news broadcasts that went horribly wrong. This is one of the most chilling cases of live news coverage going horribly wrong. In the morning of August 26, 2015, two journalists in Roanoke, Virginia were doing a live TV interview at Bridgewater Plaza near Smith Mountain Lake. Reporter Alison Parker and photojournalist Adam Ward were standing on a balcony doing an early morning segment about upcoming events for the lake's 50th anniversary. Alison was talking to Vicki Gardner, a local Chamber of Commerce director. Suddenly, a man walked up, 41-year-old Vester Lee Flanagan II, who had previously worked as a reporter at the same station. He was carrying a Glock. He fired at the reporter at least 8 times. Screams were heard as Ward's camera dropped to the ground, briefly capturing a blurry image of the man holding the firearm. Both Alison and Adam were struck and collapsed right there during the live segment. Gardner, the woman being interviewed, was also hit but survived after surgery. The station instantly cut back to the anchor in the studio, who later said she thought the noises might have been a car backfiring before realizing what had actually happened. After the attack, police launched a search for Flanagan. He was tackled, fled in a rented car, and during a police chase, later that same morning, took his own life. In June 1991, a man named Albert Dryden had been fighting local authorities for years for a small house he had built on his land. The government said the house was illegal and ordered it to be torn down. Dryden refused to accept that. By the time they showed up to knock it down, the situation had become a well-known thing, with TV news crews on site filming everything. On the morning of the demolition, a group of city workers and police showed up with heavy machinery to knock the house down. One of the people there was Harry Collinson, whose job was to enforce building rules and oversee the demolition. Dryden was already waiting outside, angry and armed. As Collinson walked toward him to speak, Dryden suddenly raised his firearm. Everyone just stood around. Journalists kept snapping photos. I guess they figured that he wasn't going to fire at them with so many witnesses, especially with cameras. But he did. Dryden suddenly fired at Collinson, who collapsed. Everyone ran and scrambled for cover as Dryden climbed over a fence and fired again toward Collinson on the ground. A police officer and a BBC cameraman were also hit while trying to escape. Dryden then fired toward vehicles and construction equipment before retreating to a caravan on the property. He claimed the area was booby-trapped, so police had to pull back and call in armed units. After a tense standoff, officers rushed the caravan and arrested him. Collinson did not survive. Dryden was later given a life sentence. In July 2025, heavy rains caused major flooding in Pakistan. A reporter was standing in waist-deep water near a dam, talking to the camera about how bad the flooding was and showing how fast the water was moving. His microphone was in his hand. The camera was live, and the scene looked dangerous even before anything had happened. The water suddenly got stronger. The reporter tried to stay steady, but the current grabbed his legs and started pushing him sideways. He stumbled, trying to brace himself, and leaned against the flow, still holding the mic. The camera kept rolling as the water dragged him further. For a few seconds, you could see his hand and the microphone above the water, and then he disappeared completely under the current. Now, I would hope he was pulled out of there, but from what I can find, there's no public report on what happened to him after he went under. I hope he's okay. Christine Chubbuck was 29, a reporter and anchor at WXL TV in Sarasota, Florida, working the morning program Suncoast Digest. The day started like any other morning, but little did anyone know Christine was planning something. When a pre-recorded segment about a local shooting jammed, leaving dead air, Christine looked straight into the camera and said the station would present, quote, what is believed to be a television first, and then said it would be, and now I gotta paraphrase for YouTube guidelines' sake, a live self-inflicted unaliving on television. And she pulled a firearm from under her desk and fired behind her right ear. The feed was cut almost immediately, but if you were watching live, you would have watched this happen. Colleagues later discovered Christine had scripted parts of what would happen after, including instructions for a staff member to report her condition as critical. She'd bought the weapon days earlier and had joked about using it on air, comments no one took seriously at the time. Her body was taken to Sarasota Memorial Hospital. She died about 14 hours later. Thankfully, The footage has never been released publicly. David Horowitz was a consumer reporter on KNBC's 4 p.m. news in Burbank, California. He was filming a normal segment when suddenly a man later found to be named Gary Stolman entered the studio and approached Horowitz with a firearm, which he pressed against the reporter's back. Stolman handed him a handwritten statement on yellow legal pads and demanded he read it live. The statement included all these incoherent claims about conspiracies involving the CIA and aliens. Horowitz had no way of knowing if the weapon being pointed at him was real. He must have been terrified, but somehow he maintained his composure and read the statement word for word. His voice barely even quivered. Producers ordered a cut, but several seconds of the interaction were already live on air. Stolman was arrested a few minutes later. Turned out the weapon Stolman was holding was just a realistic-looking BB, not an actual firearm. But again, there was no way the reporters knew that at the time. Lauren Tomasi, a reporter for Australia's 9 News, was covering massive ICE protests in downtown LA recently. She was positioned outside the Metropolitan Detention Center, reporting live when a police officer fired a rubber bullet that struck her in the leg. She screamed, grabbed at her leg. Tomasi limped away from the scene and later reassured viewers that she was okay. The network confirmed she had minor injuries but was otherwise unharmed. On August 25, 2025, Israeli forces carried out 2 airstrikes at a hospital in Gaza. Journalists were stationed on the hospital staircases and nearby balconies, broadcasting live feeds for Reuters, the Associated Press, and other international media. The first strike hit the staircase where multiple journalists were recording, immediately cutting off live feeds. Hassam al-Masri, a Reuters contractor, was operating a camera at the moment and was killed. Minutes later, a second strike hit as medics, hospital staff, and reporters rushed in, killing more people. In total, at least 22 people died. Among them were 5 journalists. At least 50 people were wounded as well, including hospital staff and civilians who were just trying to help the injured. In August 2025, reporter Dip Saikia was covering a flower festival in northern India when someone in the crowd started firing. He was hit in the right leg and under his armpit by at least 1 bullet. Festival goers scattered. Villagers at the scene quickly apprehended a suspect and held him until police arrived to take over and start questioning. Authorities later recovered what they believed was a pressurized air rifle at the spot. Saikia was taken to the hospital for first aid and then moved out of the area for further treatment. The editor of Saikia's channel called the incident an attack on press freedom and stressed that violence against journalists doing their job should not be tolerated. News outlets stated that journalists in the region sometimes face hostility while covering events. In 2013, Lee Halpin was 26. He was trying to break into journalism. He already had experience editing a magazine and hosting a radio show, and he wanted to get into an investigative journalism course with Channel 4. As part of his application, he came up with an idea to make a documentary about homelessness in his hometown of Newcastle, England. He posted a video online the day before he started, where he explained he was going to sleep rough, live on the streets for a week to get real footage of what life was like for people without homes. He spent his first night on the streets, and then a couple days in, a homeless guy he'd met invited him into this old abandoned building to sleep. The next morning, Lee didn't wake up. A friend who was with him went to check on him and found him unresponsive. Emergency services were called in. Police found his body in the derelict building 3 days into his project. Doctors in the coroner couldn't find a clear cause of death though, after ruling out things like hypothermia, illicit substances, injuries, or heart disease. So they had to just record his death as sudden adult death syndrome, basically meaning his heart suddenly stopped for reasons they couldn't explain. All right, let's close things out with a bit of levity. This one is just great. It sounds like a Kramer plot in a Seinfeld episode, but it actually happened. On May 8, 2006, BBC was doing a tech segment about Apple and its new product launch. The plan was to have Guy Cuny, a tech expert, live on air. Well, somehow the wrong guy ended up being interviewed. Guy Goma, a Congolese man in London for a job interview, was seated and suddenly handed the mic. The presenter introduced him as the expert, and look at his face when he realizes what is about to happen here? I mean, the amount of emotions he expresses on his face in those few seconds, it's just exquisite. You can see the wheels turning in his head. So the host then starts asking all these technical questions about Apple products, RSS feeds, internet trends, people downloading music online, and Guy just nervously tried to answer as best as he could, and the camera was right on him the whole time. Honestly though, he did pretty well. There weren't any long, awkward pauses. He handled it like a champ. The video exploded online, of course, and became one of those first viral TV fail moments. And with all that said, that's the video for today. I will catch you, yes, you specifically, next time.